So speaking of things that people tend to be very opinionated about. So as I mentioned to you guys, Stephanie and I are from a very similar personal finance media world. And very prominent in this world is a community of people, often kind of umbrella referred to as the FIRE community, although that doesn't entail a lot of it. But basically, these are people who aspire to reduce their costs of living to what many would define as a rather extreme extent in order to retire early or just to achieve financial independence, meaning that they no longer have to work if they don't want to. There are many iterations of this. Some people do it with more flexibility, some people with less. But it's just essentially a way of recentering your life around the idea of needing and using much less in order to have more and more freedom. Would you say that's a fair definition?
I think that's right on.
Yeah. I mean, I know some of you guys are going to scream at me in the comments no matter what I say, but listen.
We're talking about FIRE. We're just opening that door.
Yes. So, but you are not FIRE.
No, definitely not.
And definitely not. Tell me why.
I really love my life. And I
love the implication that FIRE people don't, which I think is true.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the entire premise, so much of the premise of FIRE is kind of also saying that like, I will be happy when I accomplish this. Right. And I know that a lot of people are going to come at me for that, but I see that play out again and again and again. And I'm like, well, why are you not going to your friend's wedding so that you can hit this benchmark? Like, is that really a trade-off that makes sense? It's one thing if you don't go to your friend's wedding because you have like $100,000 in medical debt and like you just are like, that will only give me stress. But if you're like, oh, I have $500,000 in the bank and I want it to be $500,000 and 100 plus 100, like that's why I'm not going to the wedding. Like that doesn't feel like a good trade-off to me. Some people would be like, oh, you live in New York City. That's a waste of money. I don't think it's a waste of money. I love living in New York City. It brings me joy every single day. Does it mean that I probably don't have as much in savings as someone who is FIRE? Yeah, I don't have as much in savings as someone who is FIRE, but I'm also happy every single day. And I'm just like, I think there's just so much about this idea of like deferred gratification in FIRE that to an extent that is not necessary. And I think it puts so much pressure on your FIRE date to like be everything, to be all the things you want it to be. Like you're going to self-actualize when you have that, hit that number, rather than like kind of self-actualizing along the way.
I think that's very accurate. I think, and to be fair, like obviously many people who live in areas with much lower cost of living can be brought joy by that place
absolutely.
Every day.
Yeah.
Although I will say people feel uniquely liberated to shit on New York City to New Yorkers while in New York.
I know.
Like I've had relatives be like, I could never live in New York City while in New York with me. And I'm like, oh really? Because I could never live in your shithole suburb. And who I will not name.
It's also, my mom constantly says, why don't you move back home? Think of the money you could save, think of blah, blah, blah. But it's like both me and my fiance's jobs can be done in maybe 3 cities on the earth. And like, I wouldn't be able to make what I'm making. And like, it's none of your business why I'm doing it. It's truly none of your business. I like where I live. When you come visit it, tell me the things you like and keep to yourself that you're like, it's dirty and I don't like the subway. Like, well, okay, I don't like driving and your town has nothing going on.
Yeah, but like, and the thing is, I would never independently volunteer that information. When I go to areas that I would not necessarily live in, I go out of my way to try and find nice things about it, But yeah, people feel really uniquely able to shit on New York. But I will say with regards to the FIRE thing, so I totally agree with you. I also think that it really, it takes as a non-negotiable given that we have no such thing as a dignified retirement in this country. It, in so many other wealthy countries, the idea that everyone gets to work and then gets to enjoy many years of their life with financial security and dignity that's just a fundamental social agreement that we're all living with. And here we don't have that. And for many people, something like a FIRE is a necessity, especially if you have, higher aspirations for what you want to do in retirement. I don't think we should at all be just accepting that as a given. And I don't think that the answer is just operate around that to as much as you can. And I don't think the answer is at all just kind of accepting that and radically redefining your life without at the very least interrogating how we could maybe move past that as a need. Because things like a really comprehensive Social Security don't materialize out of nowhere. They happen because we demand them and other societies demand them. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for us to have those things. But I think the more we focus on how you can maximize your individual success within a broken system, the less we're focusing on what should be, I think, because I think everyone should have access to a life that is somewhat balanced between those things. But I also think that where I agree with you and I have a lot of thoughts is this idea of framing your life as almost a before and an after, as a working toward and a living with.
Right.
And I feel like, as you said, life is going to be full of opportunities and moments and joy that may cost money more than you want to spend at an inopportune time. And if your entire life is being framed through a prism, even subconsciously, of this is when I'm saving versus, or this is when I'm, sowing and this is when I'm reaping, that's life isn't that way. You can't time your joy.